and just said Eve is responsible for making her lunches in the morning, and she actually told me she did pack a lunch. So the natural outcome is she's just going to need to be hungry, and hopefully nobody gives her food and nobody steps in and gives her a lunch, because then she's not going to learn from the natural
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello, happy Easter and a warm welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Well, the more we go down this rabbit hole, the weirder things get. Frankie has just released some more information about all the rules that were placed on him. He told E! Online, quote, "There were all these rules now placed on me, like I can leave when I want, but I couldn't come back until Ruby gave me permission. I couldn't come into the kitchen to eat until Ruby gave me permission, and the upstairs where Jody was completely offline. I couldn't go upstairs anymore in my own house. And Ruby would dictate all of the terms of how our interactions would be, when we would talk, and that was hard." He went on to say, "And it was during that time that I really became, I would say, dependent upon Ruby. Like if she said a kind word to me, like my whole day was made." Now, I think it's a mistake to just stop at the scandal of these statements and these details. One's got to kind of ask, where's this coming from and what is going on? And I think part of the answer is you can see there's this extremely rigid control going on, and it creates, to some extent, an emotional dependency. In this tyrannical situation, there's an emotional dependency that starts to happen. According to the New Statesman, quote, "Ruby Frankie spent 8 years offering parenting advice on the internet. On 20 February, she was sentenced to at least 4 years in prison. The 42-year-old Utah mother of 6 amassed more than 2.3 million followers after starting a family YouTube channel in 2015, but was arrested in August 2023 after 2 of her children were found in a malnourished condition. Frankie pleaded guilty, and she could be imprisoned for up to 30 years. The prosecutor, Eric Clark, spoke about the deprivation that was going on in that household. Deprivation involving food, water, beds, and entertainment. He described their living conditions as a concentration camp-like setting. Meanwhile, on YouTube, everything looks like a fairy tale, doesn't it? So I've come across 2 really interesting articles. One of them is from the New Statesman. I've just read an extract from that. And the other is from an article in the New Yorker. One deals with a supposed link between strong religious beliefs and how to raise children, specifically involving discipline. The other deals with how almost all of us are hardwired in some ways to be immune to facts. You know, how do we go down this road into kind of delusion? How does it happen? Could it happen to you? Could it happen to me? Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Welcome to the hundreds of you who have subscribed in the last couple of days. If you're enjoying this analysis, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. Now, I'm not going to go into anywhere near the level of detail either of these articles do, but they do reference interesting books from the 60s and 70s that seem to provide some sort of education or some kind of basis that it's possible that some of these people used to base their parenting on. And it also involves research that shows attitudes to child raising have changed significantly. And there's a strong sense in many quarters that it's born out of something good, wanting to protect children. Have you heard the saying, spare the rod, spoil the child? Well, it's actually a biblical saying. Ever heard of it? That's definitely the philosophy used when I was raised. How about you? And how I was disciplined. How about you? Looking back, I can think of more than a few occasions when I was disciplined at home and at school where it would definitely cross current lines of acceptable conduct. But it still doesn't reach the egregious levels we saw with Ruby Frankie and what she was doing. And I think some of the basis for that possibly comes from Proverbs 13 verse 24. Whoever spares the rod hates their children, but the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them. Now, I'm not going to preach about what children need to be protected from. I don't even have my own children. I do have a dog, and especially this year I've had to take active steps to protect my dog from being physically hurt by other bigger dogs. So you do feel, someone who's in custody of someone else, another young life, does need to make an effort to help them, to protect them. I think when it comes to children, their basic needs are non-negotiable. And it's in this area that Ruby Frankie seems to really have crossed a couple of lines. It's these other things that are subjective and not necessarily one size fits all. There are definitely things out there, including online, that require boundary setting for children. But an argument can be made that protecting children from the real world, mollycoddling them, also prevents them from finding their place in the real world, maybe even stifling their growth. According to the New Statesman, quote, the worst irony is that fundamentalists often claim to be crusaders who are protecting children from the ills of American state schools. In May 2022, more than a year before her arrest, Frankie posted a tearful video complaining that her daughter's school played immoral music in dance classes. She argued that the school's principal was not protecting the children from the world. Crying in the front seat of her car as the camera rolled, Frankie ended the video with the words, and in the end, each of us will account to God for how we protected kids. Kind of an ironic statement, certainly now, in lieu of what has happened. I remember attempts that were made to protect me and my classmates from quote-unquote immoral music. It's hard now, 30 years later, not to think of those adults as Looney Tunes. A little bit of fruitcake behavior going on there. Was that kind of thing ever part of your experience? So protection in Ruby's case became a license for tyranny. Ruby's idea of teaching her small children lessons of accountability, such as when a teacher called to say that her one child had forgotten her lunch, that's an example not of over-parenting, that's too mild a term, but a peculiar brand of narcissistic sadism. Where does that come from? That narcissism, that sadism, that need to be in such total control. The New Statesman article refers to a 1994 book, To Train Up a Child, written by an independent Baptist preacher and his wife, Michael and Debbie Pearl. Their message advocates withholding food, among other questionable practices. 3 readers who followed their advice to the letter ended up being charged for murder. And so you've got to ask yourself, where did this motive come from to want to follow these sorts of rigorous, disciplined things, right? Protocols, if you want to call it that. According to the Seattle Times, quote, the parents had several things in common. They adopted children, homeschooled them, and disciplined them with 1/4-inch diameter plastic tubes. They also used the child-rearing techniques of a Tennessee evangelist, Michael Pearl, and his wife, Debbie. And so I think if you're going to say, they adopted the techniques of an evangelist, it must mean that they were interested in that sort of belief system or psychology, if you like. And the couple have quoted the Bible proverb, he that spareth his rod hateth his son. That is according to what is in that book. From a distance, it seems strong religious views are echoed in an approach to, shall we say, strong parenting styles. It seems like, if you have the strong parenting approach, you've got good values, there's no doubt about your moral fiber. And so I think one could ask the question, does one invalidate the other? Do strong religious views invalidate strong parenting styles? I think a simple answer to that question is, if a child dies, certainly. Now, I'm not here to counsel anyone one way or another. As I said, I don't have children. But if we take Ruby Frankie as a case, do you agree that at some point she became a victim of uncritical thinking and lopsided reasoning? Lopsided reasoning is actually hardwired into us, by the way, which is why we've got to actively put in an effort to not succumb to confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is basically thinking and using reality to support what you already believe. You try and find evidence to support your beliefs. According to the New Yorker, quote, "This lopsidedness reflects the task that reason evolved to perform, which is to prevent us from getting screwed by the other members of our group. Living in small bands of hunter-gatherers, our ancestors were primarily concerned with their social standing and with making sure that they weren't the ones risking their lives on the hunt while others loafed around in the cave. There was little advantage in reasoning clearly, while much was to be gained from winning arguments." You really want to pause on that paragraph and really let it soak in and sink in and think about that kind of hardwired psychology and how it affects people in the modern day. According to an article in Business Insider, Ruby tells a story about how she took a nap before her 3 and 5-year-old children were fed lunch and then got angry with them when they tried to get a snack. I said, "That was dishonest. So I'm telling him the truth. You said you would not go in the kitchen and you did," Frankie said, referring to her 5-year-old son in the video. "You felt entitled to go take. You felt entitled to take what was in the fridge and eat it. And then you made a mess, and then you tried hiding it by lying." It's hard to explain why being legalistic with small children is simply not on. But according to one expert, there's a huge conflict in the child's mind between the love and attachment to the parent and the physical pain happening from, for example, not being able to eat. That's according to Michael Seller-Ament, an associate professor of social work at the University of Southern California. It really complicates and distorts the child's ability to have a normal, healthy relationship with food. And I think you can replace the word food here with many other things. A normal and healthy relationship with the opposite sex. And so what you're seeing here effectively is the distorted reality of the parent being foisted onto the child. The ingredients for this are simple: feeling powerless within a power struggle, feeling anxious, and then taking control via a codex of behaviors. It's a contest of tyranny versus free will. Behavior isn't learned because of a value system or out of love or relationship. Instead, it's based on the language of fear and punishment. The opposite of sadism is a word you probably never heard of, compersion, which means to derive pleasure from others' happiness. How about that? And so I'm not going to take it further than that, except to say, isn't the job of a parent to teach a child how to be independent, but without resorting to cruelty? The world is indifferent, right? Indifferent, not capricious, and kindness in a sometimes uncaring world is a virtue. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.